They called him a doddering fool as he stepped onto the gravel. Laughter like stones tossed at his knees. Michael Hale, 84, kept his chin level and his hands folded over a walking stick, as if it were a rifle he had never let go of. The insult multiplied in the chuckles around the range. Men who had never seen a front line settled into the comfort of mockery. Michael did not answer, his face a map of small creases. He bore a name and a past, each carrying a weight he did not need to explain. People expected spectacle and found only a steady gait, measured and deliberate. Every step read like a sentence kept private. They led him to the firing line as one leads a relic into a room of curious strangers. Captain Miles gave orders with the briskness of someone confident in his own judgment. Private Lewis, 22, watched with the awkward reverence of youth. His rifle lay beside him, not polished, but familiar. An old limb returned to place. He touched the stock with a careful thumb, an action both ritual and apology. Nothing else in him announced itself. A letter had come, crisp and official, stamped with the regiment crest. "You are requested for assessment," it had said in the voice of authority. He had paused, then obeyed, the duty easier than the explanation. He had not wanted the visit, yet he had gone, because some obligations cling like thread. In his cottage, the medal box had been opened for a single glance, ribbons catching a dim light and carrying a memory. He dressed without fuss and walked as one moves when something familiar calls. Recruits traded whispers about age and aim as targets thudded into place. A joke about shakiness passed and settled like dust. None of them knew the years folded under his collar. Captain Miles measured him with an assessing eye. "You will fire 5 rounds, he said, "at 100 meters, no scope, no favor." The line held the sharpness of instruction and the sting of a dare. Michael shouldered the rifle with the calm of repetition. He moved as a man who has rehearsed emotion until it becomes blood. Breathing slowed until it was a careful metronome. He reported his age when asked, not in complaint but as fact. 84, he said, and the number altered the air. Private Lewis shifted, a new thought forming behind his eyes. A young man made a sound meant to mock, then feigned task as Michael set his cheek on the stock. They had expected tremor and failure, but his world narrowed to a faint line in the distance. A memory, sharp and unadorned, touched him like a splinter under a nail. He remembered a field where a single shot had turned a day into survival for many. The recollection was small, precise, and folded into his bones. Not a tale, but a ledger kept. A promise to a comrade rose like a private debt. Hands steady, he took his sight picture with the attention of someone who reads maps by heart. The men around him leaned forward, curiosity turning to quiet attention. Silence came because a true shot commands it. The first report cut the air and settled into a neat impact that drew a restrained murmur. They looked at him not with glee, but with surprise. He reloaded with the care of a man who knows consequence. After the second shot, laughter had gone, and only a low interest remained. Captain Miles stepped closer, a frown that held something like unease. "You are better than expected," he said without praise. There was no theater in Michael, no boast, only the work of a man who lets skill speak. He had practiced this until it was a companion in long nights and empty rooms. That companion had kept him steady when words did not. The recruits had questions, yet none voiced them, unsure which question mattered. Private Lewis met his gaze and held it without challenge, offering instead a hint of recognition. It shifted something in the line, subtle and irreversible. When orders came to stand down, they did so with a softness that hinted at apology. Michael shouldered the rifle with the same careful motions and prepared to step away. A small sound behind him interrupted the movement. He paused, cane planted, and turned to faces that had altered in the span of a few shots. Private Lewis moved forward, a folded letter in his hand, edges pressed by fingers. Michael watched the youth approach, and the old man in him waited, patient and unreadable, to hear why he had been brought back. He opened the medal box for a single look and closed it with a careful hand. That small ritual left a tremor that felt like memory, not fear. Now he stood, while silence bent toward him, full of a wary expectation. Young faces asked without words whether skill outlasts the body. He had taught men to wait and to watch. Tonight they watched him back. 5 rounds. Old man, 100 meters. Let us see what remains. The voice of Captain Miles cut through the air. Michael didn't reply. He shifted his stance, slow but exact. The cane rested behind him, the rifle before him, old as the hands that held it. Miles folded his arms, confident, yet uneasy. Private Lewis stood apart, curiosity softening his face. The first shot came dry and final. The target jerked once, dead center. Silence rolled through the range. The laughter from before fell away like dust. Miles blinked, hiding surprise. The second shot came almost before the echo faded. 2 holes, so close they shared the same edge. Michael lowered the rifle, his breathing even. He wasn't quick, he was certain. Miles cleared his throat, moving target. He ordered. The mechanism whined into motion. Michael waited for its rhythm, the same way he once waited for life to move into range. He adjusted his grip, barely visible. Third shot. Perfect again. The men froze. Lewis exhaled as if remembering to breathe. Miles muttered something too quiet to carry authority. Michael didn't answer. His silence was heavier than command. For a moment, the range blurred into memory. He was 26 again, lying on a ridge near Basra. A convoy pinned, his partner's voice cracking through static. Then a shot that ended the siege and ended his promise of peace. He had sworn never to touch a rifle again, yet here it was, warm against his shoulder, familiar as breath. Fourth shot, clean and final. The fifth followed with the same precision. 5 rounds. 5 hearts stopped. Miles walked closer, boots on gravel. He stared at the targets. Neat, silent, perfect. You still have it, he said, voice low. Michael looked at him, gray eyes unshaken. It never left, he said. You just forget how quiet it is when it works. Miles said nothing. Then, softer. It was never a test. They needed to see what control looks like. Michael glanced toward the recruits. Their posture had changed. No swagger. No jokes. Lewis stood first, offering a salute without being told. One by one, the others followed. Michael nodded once, respect earned without demand. Miles lingered, gaze thoughtful. I know you, he said quietly. Basra, you took the shot through sand and smoke. You saved 3 of us. Michael didn't move. He remembered that day, radio silent, 1 target, 1 decision. He'd carried the weight ever since. That day was heavy enough without words. He replied. Miles nodded, eyes lowered. You taught me something then. And now again? The recruits lowered their rifles. Quiet now. Lewis stepped forward. Permission to ask. Sir, he said. Michael tilted his head. How do you keep your hands so still? You listen to everything that wants to move, Michael said. Then you ask it to wait. Lewis smiled faintly, as though he'd been handed something to keep. Miles dismissed the group. Michael returned the rifle to its case. Motion slow but clean. His knees ached, but the ache felt honest. He started walking out. The recruits parted for him, their silence now a guard of honor. One of them whispered, the silent sniper. He heard it but didn't turn. Outside the gate, air widened around him, behind. The range roared to life again, but its tone had changed. Commands now carried a trace of respect. Miles watched from the shed doorway, his salute small, private. Michael returned it with a tilt of his head and kept walking. He thought of the letter that had brought him here. No signature, No explanation. Just the old crest and a date. He'd assumed the army wanted to measure what was left of him. Now he wasn't so sure. When he reached the bend of the path, footsteps followed. Lewis, breathless, the folded letter in his hand. "Sir, you forgot this." Michael studied the envelope. The ink was slightly smudged. Not a clerk's hand, too hesitant, too young. He looked up. Lewis spoke quietly. "I thought if they saw you shoot, they might understand what purpose looks like." Michael said nothing for a moment. Then, with a faint smile, "You aimed true, son." Lewis smiled back, unsure if he should salute. Michael spared him the trouble with a nod. He turned away, letter in hand, steps even, unhurried. The rifle hung over his shoulder, not as a burden, but as memory reclaimed. Behind him, the recruits talked softly. No more laughter, only the slow birth of respect. Michael Hale, mocked at dawn, now left behind the quiet proof of mastery. He didn't seek gratitude or redemption. He had simply shown that precision never ages, it only waits. At the gate of his cottage, he paused once more. He looked down at the letter, then folded it neatly into his pocket. The paper rustled like a promise fulfilled. He smiled, faint but certain, and stepped inside. The evening settled softly over the small village. Inside his cottage, Michael Hale placed the rifle back in its cabinet, the barrel gleaming like a quiet reminder. He poured himself a cup of tea, the kind of ritual that required no thought, only rhythm. On the table lay the letter, folded once more. He turned it over in his hand, tracing the blurred ink of Lewis's handwriting. There was something comforting in its imperfection. He sat down, letting the silence fill the space. For years he had lived surrounded by stillness, a kind of armor against memory. Now, that same stillness felt almost gentle. He thought of the recruits, of their wide eyes and unsteady hands. They had seen him as relic and left him as proof. He had not meant to teach, yet he had. The kettle whistled faintly before fading to hush. He set the cup beside the window, eyes on the open fields beyond. Somewhere out there, new soldiers trained with steadier hearts. He smiled at the thought and leaned back. The body complained, but the spirit was strangely light. The years no longer pressed as hard. A knock came at the door, soft, uncertain. When he opened it, Miles stood there, uniform loosened, expression less rigid. Behind him, Lewis waited, holding a small parcel wrapped in brown paper. "We thought you might want this," Miles said. He handed over a framed photograph, an old unit portrait from Basra, the one Michael had never taken home. The frame had been cleaned, the glass replaced. Michael studied the faces, some gone, some still living, all caught in one unguarded moment. He nodded once, unable to form thanks. Lewis shifted, then spoke. The others asked to sign a copy of the target sheet. He produced it from his pocket, the 5 perfect holes circled in red. Michael took it, eyes glinting with quiet amusement. "You make a hero out of practice," he said softly. Miles smiled faintly. Sometimes practice is all we have left. They shared a silence that needed no filling. 3 soldiers, 3 ages of the same craft, standing in the calm after noise. Outside, a faint wind brushed through the grass, carrying echoes of the range. Miles cleared his throat. "We're holding a small exhibition next week, for training history. Would you consider attending?" Michael looked toward the rifle cabinet. "I have nothing new to show," he said. "You have something they'll never see again," Miles replied. Lewis added quietly, "You showed us what patience looks like." It was all the invitation he needed. Michael smiled. "I'll come then," he said, "but only if you make the tea." Miles laughed, the sound easy now. "We can manage that, sir." They left soon after, footsteps fading down the narrow path. Michael watched them go until the road curved out of sight. Then he returned to his chair and unfolded the letter once more. The words were simple, almost shy. Sir, I hope this finds you well. We'd be honored to see you again. No signature beyond a single initial. L. He read it twice, then placed it beneath the photo frame. 2 tokens of what was, and what had quietly become. The silence around him no longer felt empty. Days passed. The exhibition drew closer. Michael polished his old medals without vanity, only to remember. When the morning came, he dressed in a pressed jacket and walked slowly toward the barracks. The path was long, but each step carried an echo of old marches. Lewis met him at the gate, grinning like a boy with good news. They had placed his rifle in a glass case, labeled only with his name. Above it, the title read, "The Silent Sniper." He almost laughed. He had never liked the name, but now it felt less like myth, more like memory shared. Miles gave a short speech, modest and clear. He spoke not of war, but of steadiness, of hands that choose when not to fire. The recruits listened, the way people do when truth is simple. Afterward, Lewis approached with a camera. "One photo, sir." Michael nodded. They stood side by side, youth and age, present and echo. The shutter clicked once. Michael blinked, a little dazed by the brightness. He had forgotten that moments could still be captured without regret. Later, as the hall emptied, Miles pressed an envelope into his hand. "For you," he said, "a token of thanks." Michael opened it on his walk home. Inside was a small badge, the unit's old insignia, cleaned and newly engraved. Beneath it, a single line. "Precision is patience remembered." He closed his hand around it, feeling warmth rather than metal. The path home glowed faintly in late light. He reached his cottage and placed the badge beside the photo. For the first time in years, both fit naturally in the same frame. That night, he sat by the window again, tea cooling beside him. The rifle cabinet remained closed, its glass reflecting his faint smile. He had no need to open it. Outside, a fox moved through the fields, unhurried. He watched it go, steady and quiet, a shape that belonged. Something about that stillness felt familiar. He leaned back, eyes half closed. For a heartbeat, he heard the echo of the range, the laughter, the sudden hush, then only peace. The world had measured him once more and found him unchanged, not because he shot true, but because he remembered how to wait. And in that waiting, he had taught others to listen. Miles would remember the shot. Lewis would remember the silence before it. Michael Hale would remember both, perfectly balanced, like breath between heartbeats. The clock ticked gently. He smiled to himself, a man finally at rest. For the first time, silence did not feel like absence. It felt like arrival. Some people fight their battles in silence, and we only notice when the echo fades. If someone once taught you calm, patience, or courage, reach out, even just to say thank you. Or take a quiet moment tonight to remember them. Small gestures keep heroes alive.